Good morning, everybody, and hope you had a good rest yesterday. We had an interesting day yesterday, and are happy to continue today, and hope that we will have a good day today as well. We'll start up with an overview from the RMP exercise and the link to the Green Deal and the State Aid Guidelines. And I want to welcome Dr. Dörte Fouquet, who is Director for the European Renewable Energy Federation. Dörte, we really look forward to these matters because it has some great influence and importance anyhow here in Europe, but we also know that a lot of the wind turbines coming from outside Europe are involved in this matter. So therefore, please go on.
So good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be back at the conference, and I will just start the presentation, which I'm happy that I can do it today myself. So what I would like to give, as Morten just said, is this overview on the Renewable Network Platform exercise, the link to the Green Deal, the State Aid Guidelines, and a little bit an overview of what we found out on the current state of some of the national energy and climate plans. That is also maybe interesting. Not we all come from different parts of Europe and beyond, as I learned on this conference. So RF, as has been said, we are an association of or an umbrella association of national federations and associations for renewable energy, and our focus is on market access and on fair conditions for small and medium-sized production producers, citizens, and so forth. And in that respect, we are part of a consortium. We are very careful always as an association not to be too dependent on public money, because we, especially from the European Union, because we want to speak up. And if you get too much money from the governmental side or the European side, then it's hard to be critical. So, but we carefully look, and we have a lot of projects where we think the cause is helped. And one is this Renewable Network Platform, RMP. You have the web link there. It's a multi-level discussion project, and it's about boosting, rethinking, improving, redesigning renewable energy policies. And our wealth in that project is that we organize a lot, and our Danish and Swedish and all other colleagues were very, very good and are very active in this. We organize national parliamentary workshops. That's done by EU4ACE, which is, is an association of parliamentarians for renewable energy, not only from the European Parliament, but also from national parliaments. And we organize high-level conference on renewables together with EU4ACE. We have a series of workshops for members of the European Parliament, three reports per year, and in these reports we have scientific advice and input, especially, as you can see, Fraunhofer, Clarion, Navigant, but also RF. We have an online database on renewable development of EU member states. We do also national industry events, and we develop best practices. So it's quite a lot. It's a very exciting thing, and we continue to do so. We're just talking about, due to Corona, we had already a huge webinar event with in Romania, or for Romania, and we will now work with Göran Brunse from Sweden and on with our Finnish colleagues. What is very, very important for the whole setting, especially in these next 10 years of austerity, I would say, and I hope not too austere, but of adjustment after the Corona restrictions, is what can states do to give support, and how is that seen by the European Commission? And I have to say, under the European Treaty, the European Commission has a very, very strong role to play, to enforce, to forbid, to strengthen decisions by member states to give money to anybody from public funding. And I have here, you can see the reference, wait, now I have been too far. So in terms, it's a very broad definition in our treaty of the function of the European Union Treaty. A very, very broad approach what means financial support. You can see what it means, from tax breaks to direct subsidy loans, guarantees which are granted by the government or public authorities, also very broad discretion what means public, to a company within the European Union economic area. The EU law has a principle of prohibition of state aid unless and until it has been approved by the European Commission. And there are several criteria which I have listed here which have to be fulfilled all at once. So it would not be sufficient that there is advantage selected for a selected undertaking. Must and the aid must lead to a distortion within the internal market, and it must affect trade between member states. What we see here is underlying of these principles which are developed is a wealth of decisions by the European Court of Justice, which is helping to streamline and also which is helping to design aid, so in order to be at least ready to be compatible, and I come to that. The Commission for all industry sectors, economic sectors, and especially also for energy and environment, regularly with a longevity, with an application period normally of 4 years, develop so-called guidelines. They are not a legal thing in itself. They are, Americans might say, soft law. They are meant to be helping to have similar decisions on when there are similar grounds, so that there is a certain robustness and that member states feel and companies and everybody feels secure. If following some rules, there is a good chance that the Commission will authorize the state aid. So in principle, it's an administrative rule to have a balanced and equal decision practice by the European Commission and a preparatory practice by member states. So the Green Deal and the State Aid Guidelines, that is now a crucial situation we are in, because we need new guidelines. The old guidelines, I come to that, normally should have been already replaced by new ones by now, but it hasn't been done so far. They are prolonged. That's not unusual. It happened. The prolongation happened before Corona. So I also will say a bit later, I'll come back to that. It might be that it will again be prolonged due to the current situation. But anyhow, the Commission has to see that her own promise to become a more rapid transitioning world region needs the right tools. And so the guidelines must be clear and effective in supporting those greener investment. And the timeline, as I said, is unclear. We have now, the last update is there will be an impact assessment to be published in the second half of 2020, where we all, the so-called stakeholders, can and have to comment on it. A draft guidelines then should be open to public consultation in the beginning of next year and adopted in the second half of next year. RF has strict recommendation because we have always looked into the state aid guidelines. I think me as a director for 20 years for RF, I think they are my fifth guidelines for energy and environment. We have been always quite on top of the discussion. We are also leading a working group in Europe, in Brussels, with all other energy and also green associations. And we are not happy about the way the current guidelines have changed the rule in inventing and introducing this principle of auctioning first into the guidelines. We have even attacked this decision, the guidelines and the Commission, before the European courts, because we thought this is going beyond what has been set into the directive for the renewable energies, the 2009-28 EC directive, because the directive does not foresee a specific support mechanism as being the mechanism of obligation. There is a choice, but DG Competition, with its very strong arm, had introduced this rule, and even worse, have introduced the thing of technology neutral bidding. You all know that. I don't want any good details, but what we want, we have to kill that thing, and we have to have technology specific aid as a rule, non-regarding how the aid will be then set and distributed, and not as an exception as it is now. Bidding processes should be abundant, or they must be very carefully designed, and small and medium-sized power producers and cooperatives and community need much more lenient and appropriate regulation. The guidelines should integrate integrated renewable energy projects. The guidelines should complementing a better CO2 price, and there must be a smooth and clear transition regulatory framework. So that's what we are a little bit campaigning, or strongly campaigning in Brussels. We have some balancing needs. There is certainly a risk of carbon leakage due to indirect emissions costs. There is a risk of overcompensation and potential windfall profits. That's always a risk to get it right. You may remember in Germany, now almost 8 years ago or so, we had problems with our PV feed-in tariffs. They were not, the industry was so great, the prices were coming down because the market grew so fast, but our tariffs were a little bit on the higher side. So that we have to think of. There is a risk of internal market distortion. That's always a risk. And there's also how to incentivize cost-efficient decarbonization of the economy. That touches, and I don't go into details now, that touches on these issues of you want to be an industrial world region, Europe, and you want to have performing and most sustainable industry, and you have big reform options here. But this industry, when it is competing on the overall world market, faces sometimes situations where there is unfair competition. When they respond to all CO2 pricing and greenhouse gas pricing here, they may face situations where we need maybe to be a bit more helpful and to balance. So that's a whole issue for another conference. We are monitoring, we are following closely the national energy and climate plans, and I will come to that. And we will provide, once all national climate plans have been accepted, let's say, because mostly have been submitted, RF will provide within the project another analysis and look on overall positive and negative trends of how member states are really enabling themselves to that we all meet the 2030 targets. And there we have, I can conclude with some overview on the national energy and climate plans, how our work at the moment in this consortium of think tanks and others is proceeding. So we have in the national plan, they have a certain structure which is designed by Europe. You have to have the national plan itself, and you have an analytical basis. So member states should be able, or that the Commission and others can trace how the objectives and targets which are set what's the reference projection on us, and what's the impact assessment of this policy. And the dimension, maybe I can also say, we had before the National Renewable Energy Action Plans, and now we have the National Energy Climate Plans, which is much broader, much more difficult, I would say, for the member states to develop. We have this on the left side, you see, we have these dimensions: decarbonization, energy efficiency, energy security, internal market, research and development, and competitiveness. Then you have this national target and the policies and measures. Then, as I said, the reference projections and the impact assessment base. The overall rationale is that the plan should come up with every 2 years from 2023 on with national progress reports, and the Commission has to steadily and will steadily monitor the development. We all member states should have submitted their finalized climate plans. They had submitted already drafts, which the Commission reviewed, which were sometimes absurdly slim and nonnities. Then they went back to their drawing boards, and by 31st of December it should have submitted. I'm not sure if I have the latest figures here, but let's say 4 countries were very late to submit: Germany, Ireland, Luxembourg, and Romania. And especially Germany is a big country, and we have to see how seriously their final plan will then impact our overall binding European targets for 2030. I had spoken 2 days ago that we only have on European level the binding. Example, we have looked into some countries a little bit deeper, not in all. So far, Austria, Hungary, Greece, Ireland, and the Netherlands had been, in the run-up, had been quite exemplary in having done a good job. There is sometimes little acknowledgement of the role and benefits of energy communities. This is what we found out looking especially at Germany, Malta, and Sweden. There is a need for better use of terminology. There's also a need, I think, to look more on all sectors, for example, in renewable, not to focus only on electricity. And then also there was a big lack and gap on what's energy communities, what's the organizational concept, how they will treat that, what's renewable energy self-consumption, how is it seen versus the grid development, and so forth. But that's just the first glimpse. There were some things we could look deeper into. We could look into Estonia, where in the current plan, which was projected, they have increased a lot. The renewable energy electricity target was almost added by 10% in relation to the first draft. But on the other hand, heating and cooling has been lowered, which was much higher in the draft. Maybe there is a reality check. I'm at the moment I cannot say. Transport is at the same level. But it's still overall, we also think lacks ambition, and it's overall not sound enough. Portugal, the renewable electricity target for 2030 is at 80%, cooling and heating at 20%, and the renewable transport target is at 38%. And also a much improved version, but there are some unclarities. For example, regulatory barriers and hurdles to deliver on the clear if you can really get through the whole processes when there are still some planning obstacles, a lot of red tape, and investment required per sector and policies. And also to measure the attractiveness of investment is a bit unclear. It's a little bit hopeful, but we need more concrete stepping up. Greece, they have one direction. One important thing is Greece wants also, as other countries, to cease all lignite power production, in this case by 2028. So that means much earlier than they had thought before. And to increase the renewable target a little bit more, so to 35%. And so as a result of this increased phase out of coal, they are planning new fossil gas power stations to fill the gap in the electricity supply, which we as RF are always worried about that. That means a certain laziness, a certain oligopolistic structure in a given energy market where the front runner or the biggest on the turf still thinks centralized is what I can do. And in that case, we RF is not convinced that that's a good way out for Greece. So these are very, very brief glimpses. We will come back to you once the project is finalized and the Commission, and we will work with the Commission on this whole issues. This is just again the process. You can read that with the Commission is issuing what she wants to do in the common months and years to come. And by that, I think I would like to end my presentation, and I think I'm frightfully over time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dörte. It was really interesting, and I think it has a great value for everybody, even outside Europe. I would like to ask the audience if there are any questions to be raised right now. It seems not, but yes, there is one coming. Brooke's Green are coming in. Please, Brooke.
I would have one if we have a moment, if that's okay. So there,
yes.
you mentioned, Dr. Fouquet, that these the tech neutral aid. ARIF would prefer to see more tech specific aid. I have to admit, I don't immediately see the issue with it, and I would offer an example to the contrary. So a problem that we've run into is we would very much like to see our customers combining PV and wind. But in countries where there are different feed-in tariffs for PV or wind, so I believe Germany is one of them, that actually means that there need to be 2 different meters installed, so that the average or the weighted feed-in tariff can be calculated. And this is something that turns quite a few people off to adding the wind turbine to the system. So I was just wondering what the overall argument for tech-specific aid would be versus tech-neutral.
Yeah. Our view on this on the technology neutrality was always, or is always, that there is a phenomenon that when you have technology neutral auctioning, that then let's say the most advanced or cheapest technologies will win the race, and that you will not have a very balanced system change in the country. So you might have pockets of a lot of concentrated, I take an example which always is taken, let's say onshore wind, and in future it may be also more and more offshore wind, and that you get loads of power in that region, which may affect the overall balancing of the system. Whereas the approach for small and medium-sized local and much more accepted by population approach will fall off the table. We have, that's why we are not saying, we are not for a technology neutrality as a rule. We think this comes from the time, especially when the United Kingdom was still full member of the European Union, and their neoliberals who had formed DG competition with their attitude that there's the market and we are completely against this view. we also see that more and more you need the flexibility. Germany had at least, they could negotiate with the Commission when the EEG was still considered by the Commission being state aid, and there's an ongoing conflict, but the European Court just last year had come up with the Preuß Elektra 2 decision that German system is not a state aid, so the Germans, if they continue to design their feed-in like they had done in 2014, they would not fall under any discretion of this, but discretion. But in the time of discussion, they had asked that the Commission allows for system integrating auctioning, crossing over from the production also to grid and storage combined auctions. So we will see a lot of development there, and to adjust the tariff structure is something which can be done with a review of the, for example, fee law is underway anyhow. So there might be then, again, there might be then something where a member state would say, under specific condition, I do a technology neutral call because I have this and this reasons, but I think that should be the exception to the rule, that there should not be technology neutrality, because this big energy transformation to come to zero greenhouse gas emissions and negative emissions beyond 2050 means a system change which is unseen before. And energy is the biggest part of our human and industrial behavior. So we cannot leave that loose, and it has to be planned and concerted. So that would be my answer.
Thank you very much, Dörte. We are a bit back late in our schedule, but Yanis has a short question for you. Please, Yanis.
Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. You referred to Greece in your presentation, so I could not but ask, do you have any idea about any motives given to Greece for becoming more greener? And do you know how the Greek government treats them, if they are okay with the European Commission and everything? And a second one, last summer, we had a change in our government in Greece. And I would like to ask you if you have seen any difference from the previous one and the new government.
Yes. We have seen that, and we work closely. And I will connect you to our Greek friends from the Greek associations, Savas Simonides, for example, who is informing us regularly on the current situation. There are quite some positive signals. For example, we have in all countries the problem with the virus now, that auctioning, which had been won, for example, you have to build out in a very in a tight time frame, which is good, because we don't want things then ending up in a drawer, which had been the case in member states in the past, like in Ireland, with their first auctioning schemes 15 years ago. But the Greek government, for example, has now, due to COVID-19, has prolonged the timelines drastically, which is a good sign. There seems to be much more openness now also to accept independent power production on renewables, and there are several facets to it, and I would take the liberty to forward to you the last analysis and to connect you with Savas Simonides.
Thank you very, very much.
And then I would like to thank you, Dörte, very much. I hope you have the possibility to stay with us today, probably at least in the afternoon, where we from around 3 o'clock will have a open following up for the whole day.
I certainly do my best. I have something to think, but I will always come back.
Thank you very much, Dörte. Thank you for your guidelines and all your work.